Hello, feral friends and fellow nature nerds. Welcome to Dirt Dispatch number 16. I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara. So I had a wonderful experience a couple weeks ago. I do a lot of interpretive nature programs mostly at assisted living, retirement home type of places. And so I was down in Fort Collins, which is about 45 miles south of here, Fort Collins, Colorado, and I was doing a program at a facility down there. And they asked me before the program where I was from, what my background was. So I started giving them a little bit of my history. And I said, well, I grew up in Illinois, in northern Illinois. And a gentleman in the back raised his hand. He said, where at in Illinois? I said, well, Rockford, Illinois is the general area. He said, well, I'm from Rockford, Illinois. I said, well, in that case, I'll tell you that I'm actually from Loves Park, Illinois, which is a small kind of suburb of Rockford. He said, my wife's from Loves Park. And he went on to tell me that his wife graduated in the 50s from the same high school that I graduated from in the 80s, and that he worked for 30 years at a place called Woodward Governor. Now, Woodward Governor, if you look out my parents' bathroom window, is right across the highway. You look out their bathroom window, you're looking at Woodward Governor. And he said, yeah, I lived a few blocks from there. And it turns out he lived 2 blocks on the same street from where my parents lived. So that just, it made me happy. And another person in the audience, I said, well, I went to college in Naperville, and this lady raised her hand and she said, my husband went to college in Naperville. I said, well, not many people know North Central College in Naperville, Illinois. It's a small liberal arts school. She said, oh yeah, my husband graduated from there in 1959. So it was just a wonderful experience. And that's part of why I love doing interpretive nature programs, especially at facilities like that, because the people that come have great stories to tell, and they've had a love of nature, but maybe they just can't get out into nature like they used to, and I can bring some nature to them. And they have wonderful stories, and sometimes turns out it's a very small world, and you run into people in Fort Collins, Colorado, that are familiar with all of the random little places where you grew up and spent your youth in Illinois, which is nowhere near Fort Collins, Colorado. All right, I came across a quote this week that I feel like it applies, at least to me, it might apply to you too. And it's from James Burroughs, and he said, I go to nature to be soothed and healed and to have my senses put in order. And I really needed that right now. I'm feeling a lot of anxiety about the future with the recent election and what's going to happen. But there's nothing I can do right now. There's absolutely nothing I can do. So I decided that I need to pull back from social media, pull back from the news. Looking at it is just going to make me more anxious. And there's nothing to be done right now. So save my energy for the battle that's ahead. And that's what I decided I need to do. And maybe you do too. So I encourage you, if you're feeling that way, if you're feeling anxious and unsettled about the future, get out into nature. Let it soothe you. Let it heal you. Let it put your senses in order. And I saw a lot of things when I was out in nature this week because I spent a little bit of extra time. I went on a couple of good long hikes and walks and did a lot of biking. And I saw, of course, our ubiquitous pronghorn. I actually saw a one-horned pronghorn male missing a horn, so I thought that was interesting. A sure sign of winter, our black-tailed jackrabbits around here are now fully white, so they're ready to blend in with the snow, and we have gotten snow a few times. I did see a beautiful coyote, and just to reiterate that coyotes don't want anything to do with people and they're not dangerous, I was watching this coyote from probably about 100 yards away. I was kind of up on top of a hill. He was down in the bottom poking around. As soon as he noticed me, even though we were very, very distant from each other, he immediately trotted off the other direction and kept an eye on me to make sure I wasn't following. And I also saw a porcupine, which I just love seeing these little guys. This is a different porcupine from the one I saw in the spring. The one I saw in the spring was fairly large, and he was very, very blonde, and he was sitting in a tree. This one was kind of trundling along. He was much smaller than the other one I saw, and he was black. And Luckily, there was a fence between us because I would have been tempted to try and pet him, even though I know it's wrong. Um, I would have risked the pokey, but he was kind of torn. He would kind of walk towards me a little bit, and then he would turn his back, like he was a little bit torn, like, maybe I want this guy to pet me, or maybe I want to stab him with my quills. He couldn't decide. But it was a wonderful experience. I got a couple of really good pictures of him. Um, and so that's what I've been doing to soothe my anxiety and to soothe my fears for the future. So I encourage you to do the same. If you want to support the podcast, maybe that'll help soothe your soul. You can do that by becoming a patron. Check out all the information at patreon.com/dispatches from the forest. You can also send me an email at dispatchesfromtheforest@gmail.com, and you can use that same email address if you'd like to make a donation via PayPal. If you prefer Cashapp, we do take Cashapp. Our hashtag is ForestNerd. You can make a donation through that. You can also follow Dispatches from the Forest for additional content on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Only one thing left to say, and that's I'm your host, Tim the Nature Nerd O'Hara, reminding you to go outside and get dirty. Dirt Dispatches is a production of Dispatches from the Forest and may not be used or rebroadcast whole or in part without express written permission.